And Grace, please feel free to take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me well. I'm not sure always about the audio quality with headphones. I hope it works. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for the introduction with all the practicalities. I missed the first minutes. I couldn't join them. So have you already presented the topic today, just to announce it, or not yet?
Not yet.
So we have not yet. Okay, so we are heading straight into the markets and crypto assets regulation. A lot was already told about it over the past months or even year. And that's from the April 20th, we finally know what we stand on with this topic. And I mean, a lot of considerations were not necessarily very pragmatic. So we hope to, thanks to our speakers today, dive a bit more into the practicalities of it. May I kindly ask all the speakers to introduce themselves today, so the audience knows exactly who will they have the pleasure of listening to. Maybe are all the speakers online yet?
Yes, I can take the lead if you want, Andres. So I'm Biba Homsy. I've been working at the regulator at FINMA for years. I've been a Chief Compliance Europe for Credit Suisse. I have my law firm in Luxembourg and in Geneva and specialize in crypto. So I have some former VASP, also DAS in French, now upon CASP, that are really impacted by MiCA. So happy to discuss with you guys today about the impact of MiCA, especially in Switzerland.
Who's next?
Maybe I can go next. Happy to be here. Thanks, Andres. I'm Hannah. I work with 21 Analytics. We are a travel solution provider. I am the responsible for all growth efforts and also every regulatory engagement. So we are participating in the FATF VACG calls and some working groups and open initiatives for the solving of the travel rule, which is a big challenge. And we are out of Zug. So yeah, our main topic of interest is the travel rule, but also, of course, every regulation on top of crypto assets relate to it, and it's interesting to us. Happy to be here.
Nice to have you. And we have Julian.
Hi all. So I'm Julian. I actually work for Youhodler. I would say that the salient point I can bring to this panel is the fact that I work for a company right now that is affected both by the Swiss and by MiCA. So we are currently in the double transition period, and I'm a sort of split person, half of me in Switzerland, half of me dealing with MiCA. So I would say I can bring the practical points of the current and possibly future problems or benefits that we can see from this nice transition.
This will be definitely interesting. What will be the impact on infrastructure? What happens with MiCA now? Who wants to jump first on that one?
Sorry, I think there was some delay with your question, Andres. I don't know if it was only for me, but if you can repeat it.
So the question was, what is the impact of the regulation on perfectly set Swiss entities and projects that are running in Switzerland? Hear about this regulation. Concretely, when do they need to bother and deep dive into it?
So maybe I can start. Go ahead.
Yes, please go ahead. Please, Hannah, go ahead.
No, I would say that, yeah, so MiCA now, I think it's important before we dive into MiCA, understand a little bit of where it comes from and what it entails. It is, I would say, structured in covering issuing of crypto asset service providers, and putting some governance and requirements for those two types of operations. And I would say that projects for coins that are already running, if they want to be offering that for EU citizens, they would need to be licensed in one of the jurisdictions, and that's already one of the requirements that were not there. And it maybe to go back a little bit, understanding where does this come from. I think MiCA comes from, well, the main stablecoin projects initiation with Libra starting back in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, and they were a little bit worried about how that would impact the official traditional currencies. So that's one important point that we need to keep in mind, why the regulation is drafted as it is, and how it focuses a lot on stable coins and issuing of those crypto assets, not only to protect customers, but also to protect the whole financial market. So I would say that projects that are already running everywhere, they need to, well, comply with the regulations, the requirements that MiCA passes, with a lot more transparency and capital requirements and all governance requirements than are already in place in other countries. And maybe, yeah, I would say also that CASPs need a lot more of oversight than they have had before, and it also defines a lot more of how the operation needs to go, and in the 27 countries that make up the EU. Maybe anyone else wants to jump on that?
Julian, you want to go on, and then I can complete if you want.
I mean, no, please, Biba, go ahead. I mean, yes, please go ahead.
As it is, guys, I think the most important thing is to think that MiCA is a dedicated regulation for most of the crypto, catching up and a catching all regulation. So basically you had in the EU, MiFID, deposit, prospectus, IFMD for funds and so on. And that was already running. And then, as it was clearly well explained by Anna, there have been a lot of discussions, notably on stablecoins and so on. And then you have a MiCA version that tries to catch everything at a certain point of time. And I can bet you a beautiful champagne bottle that you're going to have a MiCA 2 already in a couple of months. So basically, if you are doing a utility token, but forget the qualification in Switzerland, like really at large, exchange, payment token, and so on. You are issuing, offering, trading, offering other services that are quite related to financial services like RTOs, execution, asset management. Then you fall into MiCA. And the impact will be clearly, and I think we're going to speak about that afterwards on Grech. I'm not sure where you want to talk about it, is the impact on Switzerland. So typically, I don't want to really speak about it, but I think about cost, innovations, rebirth of course. There are quite impacts in Switzerland. So
this will be just the next question. So
yeah, I know, but this is quite related because it's difficult to explain where we are to where
for sure.
we're going to head to.
Maybe, look, I went public already a bit on this. Maybe some of you followed on my LinkedIn posts. Probably, I don't know. I've seen a lot of views and everything, but I already went public on this once, and I will reiterate it here for the audience. I've been in the regulatory space, both as legal counsel, internal and external, in projects of crypto for the last 6 to 7 years now, believe it or not. Even though they say it's a new industry, it's not as new as people might think. And I've said it before, and I'll reiterate it again: fear, uncertainty, doubt. it is always the same common three things that people used to mention about crypto. Years ago, we used to see fear towards the industry because they did not understand what crypto was. They did not understand the players behind cryptocurrencies. This brought uncertainty because in any aspect in life, if something is new, people are scared of it. People are uncertain of what it can do. And there was the doubt factor that comes with these to play. MiCA and for any regulation for that matter is important because it gives at least the persons behind it, be it service providers or issuers, a route, a guide, which can gain a bit of trust, or at least help the industry gain a bit of trust in this scenario. With regards to crypto assets and service providers. In the end, rules are important, but we need to also factor into mind that it is also the players and the people who are involved in the industry that need to follow those rules. I cannot stress at the point enough as to imagine a scenario. Probably I'm going to put this to the panelists, that imagine a scenario where we had a sort of where the US had a MiCA regulation before this FTX problem happened. The scenario would have unfolded a bit differently if rules were set already at the time. Probably there weren't as many problems as would have created themselves right now. So I'm hoping that at least in this matter in Europe, within the EU, these rules can help at least guide both clients and service providers to at least having a common goal, at least to safeguarding the interest of the client. Because it's only with these kind of rules that we can actually move forward and that the industry can mature. As a sort of side topic, MiCA inspired itself a lot from the MiFID regulation. I'm sure Biba is very familiar with this, and I'm sure it is evidently clear at face value. As soon as you open the first pages, you realize this is heavily based on MiFID, meaning it shouldn't be something new out of the box that we've never heard of. There are already set standards which need to be followed. That's my take on this first question, at least.
And I think you inspired a question that I want to drop here from the chat. Will this attract projects that already issued tokens into the EU just by willing to comply? And I think you kind of touched upon it by saying this at least gives the impression of some more trust because there is a regulation, there are some standards. So maybe this would be like a first point if you or other panelists want to elaborate on that. And I just also want to drop another element to build on that. What about reverse solicitation?
So with regards to the issuer point, look, I am mostly focused right now on the service provider aspect. On the issuer points of view, in my opinion, there's still a bit of a gray area as to how countries, issuers coming from outside Europe will affect the market and how they need to comply. The rules are set. It's just in practice, I'm not sure, but that is something I would maybe leave for someone else to address from the panel. With regards to reverse solicitation, again, I'm a firm believer that we are not reinventing the wheel for service providers. This is not a wheel reinvention. Let us look at the more traditional models in Switzerland. Every bank that operates within the EU has its own subsidiary inside the EU. There's a sort of pyramid structure. This can be the same model that we adopt for crypto. And to our benefit, at least in Switzerland, because I forgot to mention that at least our headquarters are based in Lausanne, we already have a sort of framework to fix on with the LS Fin and the FINIA, which is something which we can already base ourselves on to look into MiCA as well. So it's not something new. With regards to solicitation, look, the reverse solicitation, it's always a gray area, as always. I believe that at least from an EU level, with the Swiss, with a Swiss operational entity and with one EU branch or subsidiary, you can already solicit the greater part of all the EU based on the passporting and on having the Swiss entity. It's just what goes beyond that then, which needs to be answered, what goes outside the scope of Europe.
Maybe Biba, you want to jump on that?
Yes, so maybe on the reverse and on the other impact. For the reverse, you're right, Julian. The reverse solicitation that is mentioned actually in MiCA is developed with the same context as MiFID. So for those who have been in the financial industry and know about MiFID, it's the same: soliciting, marketing, promoting. This is the three pillars. The reverse solicitation actually is quite something that is burning at the moment with, let me say VASP at the moment and not CASP. So not about MiCA, but about the VASP in general. Those who have developed an app on Apple and Android knows that reverse solicitation is quite burning at the moment. I'm supporting quite a lot of VASP at the moment about answering to Apple whether you are soliciting each country at the moment, because Apple doesn't make any difference between if you are targeting EU or if you are actually targeting this country, this country, this country, and the 27 countries. So the discussion about reverse solicitation at the moment is a hot topic. And the position that typically the IMF or BaFin has provided, don't forget that MiFID is a directive, which means that actually there is a transposition law for each country, which means that each country has already quite a lot of position regarding each time the reverse solicitation. You have the same position and you can use the same position more or less with the VASP industry and with the crypto assets. So not a huge game changer. However, for Switzerland, it's still the same position, which is not the best. And as Julian said, you have two considerations: whether you want to build a business on reverse solicitation, or do you want to specifically solicit, promote, market the EU. And then it's going to be fun to see what ESMA come, because the position on ESMA for solicitation, for reverse solicitation, have been quite restrictive in the past. So typically, this is where we're gonna see if crypto is even worse. You may have seen today the interview from Lagarde, saying that the first two things that they are going to speak today is about stable coins, stability, and crypto assets. That's fantastic. So we'll see how this develop, but don't forget, it's a political thing, which means that if you take this was also something you spoke, Julian, before. If you take the political view and if you take the recital in MiCA, there is somewhere mentioning that there is an international, I don't have the wording expressly, but you need, all the EU country needs to have an international effort to promote MiCA convergence through BCBS, Basel Committee, FATF, and the third one I forgot. So typically, FSB, of course, FSB. So typically, this is going to be, is MiCA is going to be the only regulation in EU? That's not our problem. Our problem is that maybe MiCA is going to be promoted by 27 countries to begin to become the next standard. That's another question.
Maybe just go on.
Anna, go on.
No, maybe just to add, because I saw there was a question on the chat. Yeah, there will be guidance from ISMA, I think in 1.5 years after entering into force, which means 1.5 years plus 1 month, because it probably enters in force in June, MiCA. But also just one small point is that not all, as Julian brought up, MiCA is ready and it's done, but it's far from perfect. And Biba also mentioned that we will probably see follow-up regulation on that, because it, of course, this is a result of a snapshot of the present, right? And for instance, staking and all of that is not covered. But they are very clear on MiCA that it's the service provider or the issuer responsibility to check if what they're providing is covered in MiCA, and if not, that doesn't mean that they don't have the requirements. They must, they probably can be covered by other type of regulations already present in the EU, which can also be binding for those. Yeah.
Maybe this brings me to our next question, and I'm gonna drop a practical example. What do we do with DeFi and MiCA? And the next question was then, what's the impact on the interest that Switzerland may have still as a jurisdiction? Because if everyone, because of the wide scope of reverse solicitation, how it's interpreted, needs to comply with MiCA anyways, why would you still come to Switzerland at the end? So how maybe DeFi is the only one that could still be interested in Switzerland. What's your take on that? Who wants to jump first?
Look, if I may, I'm gonna just maybe drop a small bombshell. DeFi, I cannot understand how this aspect of Swiss law has been sort of underestimated. Maybe my interpretation was not always on point on it, but maybe it's something which people are overlooking, which is there is a section regarding the cooperative, which is the companies in the cooperative, which is heavily underestimated. And the structure of a cooperative is literally everyone pooling in their resources to create a cooperation. The more classical business models would be the Coop, the Migros, even if you have to look into the more financial industry, you can see the Raiffeisenbank, which is basically a cooperative in itself. This could be a basis for Swiss companies, in my opinion. Maybe it's a radical approach, maybe it's something which was examined and might not have been accepted, but I believe that Switzerland has a lot of potential on the DeFi sphere, even because there are company structures which allow for it to be catered on some level. Now, again, we need to also see the approach of FINMA with regards to these matters. But at a pure basis, I think Switzerland would be welcoming for this type of project, because in the end, the decentralization, it is what decentralization is. Now, to what extent can something really be decentralized? We can stay here till tomorrow morning discussing it. But I think on that tiny point, I think Switzerland does have some attractiveness on that level.
I mean, maybe a concrete example. I have realized the white paper needs to indicate a phone number and an email address to contact people. I'm not sure most DeFi protocols will insert a number that people can reach out to ask questions. So how do you handle that? So thank you for that input. Who else wants to add something on that?
Maybe just to add, because I heard from Peter Kirstens, who was like one of the persons driving MiCA and ideating it from the beginning. And he mentioned that they still don't know how to regulate DeFi. They are open to ideas on how to regulate DeFi, that he goes to sleep and wakes up trying to come up with ways to regulate DeFi. And MiCA does cover, well, the decentralizing name only, or yeah, it doesn't matter if you call yourself decentralized. If you're not, and there is a company behind, then you are subject to the regulation and you need to be on top of it. It doesn't matter if you are trying to escape from that only because that's a marketing approach or the way that it's set up. But on maybe on how it impacts Switzerland and how it makes it more attractive, I think there is a kind of trade-off there, right? Because as we mentioned, the passporting, if I am on a project and want to be able to, market it to a bigger market with less effort, then you probably want to be within MiCA and licensed and registered within one of the 27 member countries, right? Which is a benefit for having MiCA, but also if you are a decentralized, if we're talking about DeFi and the MiCA regulation is all, and the AML regulation is also based on entities and focused on entities. And if there is no entity, then you're not regulated and you have no certainty. So that's a bit of, the way that it is right now with MiCA. I think for DeFi, then there is a lot more of uncertainty than for other types of CASPs. Yeah.
What's your take?
Yeah, if I may, look, guys, from a practical point of view, MiCA is published. Well, it's about. You have 12 months, 18 months, okay. They have to go together and decide which country is going to be the less attractive in EU to receive the third parties request and so on. It's going to be a mess, to be honest. There is an advantage in Switzerland, and I see, I clearly see it already with the AMF going from registration to authorization, the way that it goes in France, how Luxembourg is actually looking a little bit backward and checking what is going on. So everybody is looking on what's going on. At the moment. So this is actually where Switzerland has always had its strength. The qualification of token hasn't changed since 2018. Okay, we have an approach in Switzerland where you want to do asset management. Okay, you want to do with financial instruments, or do you want to do with crypto? How do you want to set it up? You take the usual PINTA, PINIA, GVG, and you apply it. So it's not like it's rocket science. Sorry, Andres. Sorry, and myself as well, because I should better tell the lawyers, but it's not like it's a rocket science. It's laws that are applicable in Switzerland. Okay, it's crypto. It's a little bit more complicated, but we have a framework that is stable, that is certain. We can work with the regulator, and believe me, in some countries in the EU, it's not possible. Just try to go in Belgium, try to go in Spain. Sorry for the guys located maybe here during the panel, but it's kind of challenging. So we are talking about a regulation that for sure is going to be complicated if you really want to market in the EU, and then you need to organize. But if you are considering something worldwide, you want to have your business running now, you have your business running now, you have worldwide clients, you have, I don't see something that is happening tomorrow. Definitely not. So yeah, for sure, it's a good thing, and it has an impact, especially for domiciled clients, the EU domiciled clients. But I would not say it's an amazing impact. It's something that comes from time to time, and to be organized and define your business model, and maybe evolve your business model, but not necessarily right now. This is how I see, at least with clients in the EU. Even in the EU, I'm not speaking about Switzerland, even in the EU.
I like the example you gave for Belgium because the FSMA, they published guidelines on how to categorize tokens on the end of last year. While in Switzerland, indeed, it's been since 2018. And when we think about it, the regulation sets new standards for crypto assets, but it does not help to draw the line between what is a crypto asset and which category and what is a financial instrument. This is still left there. So if we hesitate and we borderline between those two, well, we don't get any additional guidance on that, right? So that's an interesting point. If you want some certainty as to what is your token and you believe that you're borderline between financial instruments and just a crypto asset, and you hesitate between which regulation you're supposed to be subject to, maybe reaching out to Switzerland is still interesting. Let's maybe shift quickly to AML and the travel rule, because this is also a very important topic, right, in terms of regulations. And how will this all work out? I know, Hannah, that you had a lot of things to say on that.
No, maybe just to start, I think it's important to mention that, AML, all the AML regulation is still coming up, the AMLR and the package that they are preparing, and it will be, well, completing MiCA, right? It is mentioned in MiCA in various places, and MiCA doesn't do any AML whatsoever. And but travel rule was passed with MiCA, right? It was kind of rushed from the rest of the AML regulation, and from our talks with the policy advisors, they mentioned travel rule was a little bit more important and urgent to be passed, and that's why they brought it together with MiCA, and it's approved and will be also in application within the beginning of 2025. What I think is important to mention is that the travel rule in the EU doesn't differ a lot from the one in Switzerland, which are very strict ones. So the travel rule from the FATF recommendations, they have opened to countries to define on thresholds. For instance, Switzerland has no threshold. Every transfer of crypto assets between CASPs need to be compliant with the travel rule, and that became the same just now with the recent modifications that they did when approving the law just on the April 20th. So in the EU, it's the same. Travel rule applies from €1. Every transaction between CASPs needs to comply with the travel rule, and they require a little bit more of information than Switzerland. Switzerland only asks for account number, if I'm not mistaken, and the EU will also ask for your wallet address and some more information on the physical address as well of the customer. On that, also, what I would say that Switzerland is a little bit more strict with the travel rule is with regards to unhosted wallets. So self-hosted wallets, the private wallets are also in scope of the travel rule, of course, because otherwise you are living in a loophole, right? You can just avoid the travel rule. If you're transferring from a CASP to CASP, you just transfer from a CASP to unhosted wallet, and then from that unhosted wallet to another CASP. Congratulations, you avoided the travel rule obligations as a customer. And from that perspective, both regulations have included unhosted wallets within scope of the travel rule. And in Switzerland, every transaction involving an unhosted wallet requires ownership proof of the wallet from the customer. What does that mean? If I'm trying to withdraw my money from a CASP, then that CASP, we need to verify that I own that with that wallet before allowing me to transfer there. That is not the same in the EU, although you need to identify who is on the other side of the transaction when you're transferring to an unhosted wallet as a CASP. you only need to prove ownership above 1,000 euros of worth of the transaction. So that's one thing that Switzerland is a little bit stricter. But if well, it's a personal opinion, if I could say that how I imagine that will play out in practice, as travel rule is a very two-sided game, right? You need to collaborate with a VASP on the other side of the world, or wherever they are, with their own regulations, in their jurisdiction. I would say that in the end, the strictest requirements will be the ones applied more, or in more volume, because being in Switzerland, and if you are transacting to a company that with a company that is not on a travel rule regulated country, let's say someone, Brazil, that hasn't have any regulations on the travel rule, the CASP in Switzerland, they cannot transact if the other CASP on the other jurisdiction doesn't play the game. So that's one thing that I imagine will happen in practice, and that's also one of the reasons I believe that EU has gone to the threshold of nothing, right? The first euro, you are already subject to the travel rule. They mentioned that crypto has this international nature, and that therefore they shouldn't differentiate transactions within the EU or outside. And I think that's correct. But yeah, they took out any threshold, and they are going very similar to Switzerland in that regard.
Okay. Julian, Norva, do you want to add on that?
No, I cannot agree more on the general point that in fact it is a CASP collaborating with CASP exercise. It will be problematic if there's no general collaboration from the ecosystem. It's already, I'm thinking from a practical point of view, it's already difficult to keep up with the fragmented rules, and this ties up with Biba's intervention earlier for the other question. With fragmented rules and fragmented standards, it's not going to work, guys. Let me tell you, imagine the situation in Switzerland, where we currently, obviously, Swiss companies currently operate on a general standard. It could be for the TFR, it could be for anything else, with the video and online identification circular of FINMA, which is very pragmatic, very straightforward. It tells you what it needs to be done, what can be done, what cannot be done. I cannot right now imagine a situation where these standards would be applied across the board in Europe, and the reciprocity from the EU countries to apply these type of standards or to accept these rules. I cannot imagine this scenario without having a uniform document between all 27 countries to actually get this done. You know, it's very fragment, and so it's already complicated to get the online identification point. So the basic KYC and due diligence points, to get them all compliant within every country, it's already a headache for operationally. And it's a lot of work, a lot of manual work operationally, just to get it right for every country. Imagine now we have to add the TFR level without having at least cooperation between us. So the appeal would be simple. We're in this together. It's required. There's no way of getting out of it. So yes, I would obviously encourage one thing from regulators, at least to be, in the sense, pragmatic, and to identify that CFIs, CFIs, and CDFIs can be the actual tool to help you identify clients and transactions and to verify everything. The fact that we sort of CFIs and DFIs are CFIs and CDFIs are obliged to actually do identification and verification is something which can actually help promote the rule itself. So there needs to be also more maybe awareness of how it happens operationally, what can be done operationally, what can be achieved at a best efforts level, and to apply that standard across the board within the EU as well, in order to be able to at least reach to get to be compliant.
Thank you. Maybe before I start looking a bit more into the questions that were dropped into the chat so far, if I summarize correctly what we said so far, if you have a complex model, you're not sure how to categorize the token, whether it's financial instrument or not, and there's no obvious marketing because for whatever reason you're just at the app, you don't have an app on the App Store, you don't want to reach out actively to users, Switzerland may be interesting. If you want to reassure users because you want to show that you're complying with some standards despite just having a utility token, the new regulation may be attracting people a lot because it's a way of having the stamp of, hey, I'm MiCA compliant, it looks good. Then if you're anywhere in amongst the 1,000 shades of decentralization, meaning you're not fully decentralized, fully disintermediated as the regulation wants you to be to avoid those regulations, then as well, maybe Switzerland is an interesting place to end up, but having all those restrictions in terms of universal citation in mind. Is this a good summary so far of what was discussed? Or do you want to add anything to that? Otherwise, I'm going to quickly just scroll.
Yeah, just one thing on the AML. I thought when I heard Anna, I didn't think before. It's just so there is. You spoke about the travel rule. The travel rule has a specific application, especially for payments. For CAF in general, is going to be the AML, and the AML, guys, is quietly and heavily at the moment discussed. It's in trilogue, so it's not even trilogue negotiation is a process afterwards to discuss at the EU level. So I'm not speaking about MiCA, but I'm speaking about the AML, so the AML package in the EU. So there are negotiations, and we are heading to several things in the discussion. That is not in the TFR because TFR has been published. It's not in MiCA because it's adopted. It's about the fact that NFTs should be under AML CFT requirements, that DAO and DeFis are considered to be maybe under AML CFT requirements, but also something that is impacting you and all the finance, typically that the threshold to identify would not be 25%, but maybe around 50%. Someone spoke about 10% at the moment. So there are discussions about that, which will also impact the whole framework. So you see the interconnection, as it is in Switzerland actually, between the financial regulation in general and the specific regulation for crypto assets.
Okay.
Just take my words as temporary because there are negotiations in the moment. So it's quite political.
We will need to have a follow-up update event once this is finalized. Amongst the questions, there's one that seems also a good way of wrapping things up. It's does MiCA regulation put an unfair advantage on EU companies comparing to the regulation standard in Switzerland? I think this was more or less answered during the conversation, but who would want to take that one and provide a more clear answer? Can
I'll
we say
let the
there's
experts in Switzerland lead that one.
So we have two experts, Julian, Biba. Which one? Who has a take on that one?
An unfair advantage for EU companies comparing to the regulation standard? I wouldn't think so, to be honest. From my experience to date, the reason Switzerland thrived, I think, as a crypto community, in the sense that there's a lot of crypto companies within the ecosystem, is the regulatory certainty. It already had an advantage since 2017 and before, to be honest. They started actually modeling the ICO guidelines, the stablecoin guidelines, and then the DLT Act came to follow. The Federal Council DLT report came in 2018, so there was a certainty. So I wouldn't think that there is an unfair advantage for EU companies, honestly, because the space is already established in Switzerland. I think now the established companies in Switzerland want to actually jump into the EU, tweak a couple of things, because to be very honest, the industry standards are already close to MiCA, or if they're not close to MiCA, they copied off MiFID, which was transposed, which in Switzerland turned out to be FINSA. So a lot of crypto companies already sort of modeled themselves a bit on the FINSA from what I've seen in the industry. So now just take that model, jump into the EU, and you're pretty much set to go, in my opinion. But opinions are there to be challenged.
Biba, do you have a different take on that one?
Yeah, it's okay, we are here to speak about MiCA and Switzerland, so unfair advantage for one or the other. I think it's actually complementary. It depends on the clients you are marketing and on your business model. You want to really market the EU market, it's like GDPR. Is GDPR something that is unfair compared to the DPA in Switzerland? I don't think we are targeting the same people. So your base customer is in the EU, fine. But if it's worldwide because it's decentralized, then yeah. I don't think it's an unfair advantage for EU companies, and it's not an unfair advantage for Switzerland. It's how you set up your business model, and then you adapt.
If it's not an unfair advantage, could it still be negatively impacting somehow Switzerland?
It will impact, like it has impact in the past, the financial industry, like it still impacts the banks. Coming from the regulator, I was there when it was all the discussion about market access. It's not a surprise that most of the Swiss bank has a presence in Lux, in France, or in Frankfurt. I mean, that's because you need to. Are these banks the one that in the EU have the most margin and have the most benefits? No, probably not. But they are here because they need to serve the EU clients.
Then maybe from that to a very practical example, we got a question relating to, would it make it easier for projects like LibraDiem now to pull their old concept up of the drawer and start issuing such coins again in Europe?
If you mean more regulatory certainty?
Exactly.
Yes, probably because they are very clear on what a stablecoin issuer needs to do, and they even go as far as basing most of the regulation on the different aspects of a stablecoin. So there is the EMTs and ARTs. EMTs would be like the one that is pegged to only one single currency, official currency, and the ART would be where Libra would fall into. It's more like a basket of commodities or a basket of commodities combined with official currency or any combination of those. So yeah, they are very clear on what you need to do, which type of capital do you need to have, what does the white paper need to entail, what type of governance this issuer needs to have in place, what is the okay requirements for people to be involved in leading those projects, etc. All of those is quite clear for stablecoin issuers. So yeah, I think that would make it easier. What do you guys think?
Maybe to get the other opinions, I'm just going to add a twist to the question. If someone has a stablecoin project, is it then a the best choice just to run straight away to Europe and then rely on this clarity, or is it still interesting maybe just to rely on the rules that exist in Switzerland for that?
Then it becomes political, in my opinion. I agree with Biba.
Mhm.
Not political in an EU sense, on a global level. I cannot imagine how the outtake will be of having a huge influx of US dollar stablecoins going to Europe without without even the Fed having something to say about it. It's too political. Launching of the project, I think it's possible. I think it's possible, but again, we cannot for these type of projects, you can't restrict yourself only to Europe. The world is globalized. The core itself of blockchain is to be decentralized on a global scale. So even if they do launch it at an EU-Europe level, from a philosophical argument, I would say that you can't stop there, and they need to already be aware of what needs to be done on a global scale.
Ida, what is your take on that?
The issuance of a stablecoin is kind of tricky and still in Switzerland. Most of you probably knows how difficult if you thought about issuing a stablecoin. If it's a payment token, if it's a deposit token, if it's securities, you have requirements, and you have requirements in terms also of capital, of liquidity. So Switzerland does not have, and that's not a surprise why you don't have that much of a CH stablecoin. That's because the requirements of FINMA are quite restrictive at the moment. So not sure here there would be something as an advantage in Switzerland unless there is the position of FINMA evolutes and grows, will grow, sorry. But on the other side, as Julian said, a stablecoin that is offered in EU, like a euro stablecoin, a GBP stablecoin in Europe, is going to be tricky. However, they are talking now at the IMF about the CDBC this past days. So I'm pretty sure that would be interesting to see. They still want to grab some kind of control. So I think we are just in the very beginning of the discussions. And where we didn't hear about the central bankers these past years doesn't mean that actually we heard about CBDCs, 2 years ago, then we don't hear about them. I'm pretty sure we will hear about them very soon, to be honest.
Okay, I was scrolling through the chat just to see if anyone still connected has a last question for those last 5 minutes.
I think we have someone with a raised hand and Grass.
Where?
Maybe I think we can.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
thank you very
anyone
much. So I jotted down my question into the chat already. So looking at MiCA as Lex Libra, how likely is it, that someone like DM, who has basically developed this whole thing and was, a few days before launch, pulls their old concept out of the drawer and immediately issues a stablecoin in Europe? Does MiCA, in your view, enable that, support that, or does MiCA prevent that?
I believe this is the question we took just before, but
we
if
just took
anyone
now.
wants to add it, so it's just the one we wrapped up now.
Definitely, it's not prohibited. It is actually in scope of the regulation.
Yeah, it's helping.
And it's inspired the regulation, I would say.
So if I summarize what was said just before, is definitely it helps. And then to be verified whether it only helps just to have it in Switzerland, or maybe if still there's some interest in having those kind of projects, in Europe, or having them in Switzerland. Is there anyone else also with questions still, or your panel is clear enough so far on all the answers? Has it satisfied the curiosity of everyone? Let's see. Are there any? I don't think so. Should we consider it as a wrap? Any closing remarks from you?
Maybe,
Does anyone
yeah,
have
start
any
looking
closing
start looking into compliance with MiCA and TFR. It's coming. It's not going away, unfortunately, for most. And yeah, there's a lot to be done. And I imagine even if you're looking at licensing and get registered in other jurisdictions, most of the regulation will be at least inspired and matching what this huge political bloc has put out.
Biba, any closing remarks on your side?
I agree more with Anna, actually. I think definitely you need to just look at your, I told before, look at your business model, check if you need to actually adapt your streams. So compliance for sure, risk, and your target markets. And if your target markets are the EU, just look at how you're gonna develop that.
Julian, what is your final take on that?
First take, second take, third take. It's not a 1 week exercise. It's not a 1 week exercise. I'm telling you from now, it's from our experience, from my experience personally right now, it's a long-term project. So do not underestimate it from a time point of view, for sure, because it could also mean redefining company cultures on some levels, especially in the industry. So it's a chunky exercise.
Let's say don't advertise in the EU if you're not ready for it. And it may take some time.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to all of you for joining and sharing your insights. And to everyone who joined to listen to us today, don't hesitate to reach out and continue the conversation on LinkedIn and our other media, where apparently some of you are quite active. I've pointed out that you had this post that you advertised earlier, Julian, where you expressed yourself on the topic on LinkedIn. This was duly noted. I have to check that out.
It's believe me, it was painful enough when they were revising the text many single times, and I'm like, listen, you know, we're tired of being fragmented. Please just give us a standard. Let's just go there. And when they got there, I mean, yeah, you know, everyone was like, yeah, we're not sure, but yeah, come on, guys. It's about time. It's about time.
It is. Well, thanks again for everyone for joining. And I guess it's a wrap.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very
Thank you.
Much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.